All right. Well, thanks again for tuning into the Why Influence podcast, where we interview influencers about their why and why they're sharing. Today, we have an awesome guest. His name is Paul Edwards, and Paul's authored a book called Business Beyond Business. He's got a podcast called Influencer Networking Secrets, and he's a ghostwriter for some really large influencers. So he's sort of like the influencer behind the influencers, per se, in some regard. So I just want to say, Paul, thank you for taking the time to come on today.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. It's a privilege and an honor to be here.
Of course. So can you give me like a 2 to 3 sentence elevator pitch about your platforms and your brand and what it is that you do?
Well, I like to say it's the secrets of how influencers network, and it's the secrets of networking with influencers. And so there's the podcast, and then this year I'm rebranding and reissuing my book under the same title so that everything sort of lines up, because I found that in the journey that I took to get to where I am, that the consistent, valuable growth tool that I had was interviewing people of influence and building relationships with them.
Yeah, and I mean we met at Podfest, and I think we're by the water cooler actually, and we're just chatting there, and it's very apparent that you knew what you were talking about when it comes to networking with other influencers. So looking forward to dive into this with you.
I was very fortunate. I had reason to learn how to do it. I was deficient in it like anybody else is, and overcame that, and actually became the better I got at it, the more well things went for me. So the more interested I was in seeing how far down the rabbit hole I could go.
Awesome. So where did this journey start for you? Like, I guess, did you start out with the ghostwriting and then move into learning how to network, or did you network first? Like, where's the beginning of your sort of sharing journey, would you say?
Well, it starts for me several years ago in the insurance business, and I like to tell people that the good thing about the insurance business is that you sell a product that nobody wants to talk about, right? Everybody's sort of either, at best, they don't understand it, at worst, they hate it. And what they're really looking for is a person they can trust to handle it for them. And that's what I had to learn to become. Well, the way that I found that I could access the people that I saw the most, because it's a tight-knit business community here where I live, was through going out and every time I got the opportunity to speak, was talking about things that were either common to all entrepreneurs, or if I was speaking to somebody specifically, an ability to speak directly their kind of lingo. And there's some industries where I have that, and there's some where I don't. But as long as I kept the subject off insurance and on marketing and promotions and building relationships and, getting more people in the door, getting in front of more people, et cetera, people were interested to listen to me. And moreover, if they liked me enough, they were interested in having me serve as their insurance agent in the process. And so that became my primary business model. And what happened was, through that, I created what I call my own unpaid sales force, right? So this is a group of other entrepreneurs and business owners and people who are somewhat peripheral to the insurance industry, like loan officers and realtors, who wanted somebody that they could constantly recommend to do to deliver the service I did. And that was how it came to be a 100% referral thing for me. I would sit in my office and wait for the phone to ring, and it actually rang.
And that was all because you were networking for something that was unrelated to what it is that you're selling. It was sort of like a sister way of communicating with someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think even today, to some degree, it's the same thing. Content ghostwriting is not as boring or disinteresting of a subject as insurance is, but neither is it the world's sexiest thing to talk about, right? Other than to say that's my occupation, and people are like, what is that? It's intriguing, but it's not glamorous. And quite honestly, I mean, if we're going to be forthright and honest about it, you're going to get you can get that stuff done dirt cheap by people on sites like Fiverr and Upwork. The question is that what you really want? But nonetheless, it's not something that only a tiny minority of people on the face of the planet can do.
Yeah. All right. So you were in the insurance business. You started going to networking events, talking about marketing, and then built like this referral system. And then somehow you went from there to ghostwriting. As where's the progression, or what's the story there?
Yeah, there's a lot of in between there. I'll just say that 2 years ago, my insurance career came to an end. And it was partly the result of a huge amount of personal growth I was going through at the time, and suddenly, I could sense it that this old thing that I had been doing was I'd outgrown it, and it was going to have to pass away. And a couple months later, it did. Um, and nothing that I had done in the past was working anymore because I was getting too excited about things that were coming down the pike. So when I first left, I tried my hand. I tried basically going the author, speaker, coach, consultant, influencer type of model, and I had a big journey of discovery and growth to go through to get to it. But all along, what really helped me, what really greased the skids and kept me motivated and kept me saying there's something to this, I can't give up on this just because it's not making any money in the moment, was podcasting, and which is the new networking, right? I just kept getting in front of all of these people that I had no business talking to, other than the fact that they were open to appearing on a podcast, and I had figured out a way to get them on my show. And so I said, I don't know where this is going to lead, but I'm going to keep doing it. And eventually that led me to Aaron Walker, who's now also appeared on your show.
Yeah, we just got off the call with him.
Yeah, yeah. And really with Aaron, it was building. It was the sum of building a ton of relationships. Some of them went 10 miles deep, some went 100, some went 1,000, and then with him it went 10,000. It was the opportunity where he needed somebody to perform that service for his blogs and Alexa briefs and stuff like that. And I was at a point where I was willing to let myself become a part of that and see if it would work. And so we started it out, and then it worked, and then it sort of built from there, and other people started taking notice of it. And next thing you know, I've got a bunch of clients asking me to do it for money. And so that was wonderful.
Awesome. So this whole journey for you started 2 years ago, when you sort of left the insurance business and started this new journey. And you started out wanting to be an author, speaker, consultant type of person. And like, did you give that a solid attempt, or did you like consider it and then say, okay, well, let me try a different angle? Like, what did that look like for you?
Well, I did try in some ways to do that. But of course, at the time you start trying to do something like that in the environment, the 2018, 2019, the way social media had changed, the way attention had become so difficult to get, I quickly found that it didn't take me very long to figure out that nobody was hearing me, right? And the people who were paying attention to me were either friends who were just being nice to me, or they were bots who were trying to, I don't know, get me to sign up on some kind of scheme or something like that. So I guess I could have kept plugging away at it, but eventually I would have run out of money and run out of energy and passion. And it wasn't really truly authentic with who I am. I still had a lot of internal issues to work through there in terms of going to the marketplace with who I truly am and what I'm truly gifted to do.
So for you,
go ahead.
You realized it wasn't feeling as authentic when you were in it. You started maybe losing some passion, or you weren't willing to overcome the constant barriers. And then obviously like it's a grind to get through that. So then you found this other angle where you could do this networking. Did you start with the podcast before the book, or?
I was doing the podcast the whole time. That one I
Oh,
started
okay.
almost just a few months after I left the insurance business.
Oh, okay.
But I found success with it. The show kept building, the audience kept growing, and the guests kept getting better and better, and I kept getting better and better as a host. And I had I found it was a phenomenal relationship building tool. I just didn't have anything anywhere to really put those relationships that would lead to monetizing them, because I couldn't figure out what my offer was. You understand? I couldn't say, well, this is what we have and you should join it, or you should tell your people to join it, or send out an affiliate email or whatever. I didn't have any of that. So when Aaron came along and this writing opportunity came up, coinciding with that, I was joining his mastermind, the Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind, which is a very tight-knit group of entrepreneurs. And both he and I agreed that it was very likely somebody was going to get wind of the fact that I was writing for him, because he's too busy to do all that content by himself. And there was a chance that somebody was going to poke up their head and say, hey, I need this too, because there's a fair amount of influential people in that group who have similar or the same kind of thing going on. And so it was only a matter of time. And then somebody did. And after that, it started to snowball from there.
All right. So you started this journey 2 years ago. About 3 months after that, you started your podcast, and you went through this journey of figuring out where you're going. So what kind of, like, how recent is the snowball effect for you, or joining Aaron, I guess?
That was October and November of 2019. So I did 17 months of, struggling and failing and trying to figure things out. It just took me a long time. And nothing good in my life has ever come in lickety split. It's one of those things that you've got to iron out some old habits and some old ways of thinking, and let that old version of yourself die, so to speak. And yeah, that was the journey for me.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I can relate a lot to that, actually, because I started my podcast. I was not comfortable sharing. My first 3 were audio only, and I edited myself every time I spoke in those. And then I got to 30, which was my goal. And then after that, I started live streaming. So here I am doing a live stream with you. But like, it's not like I have anywhere to send somebody or for somewhere to, capitalize on this. I'm just aiming forward with just moving forward and keeping the momentum going, and then faith that something will work out, which seems like it took you about 17 months for that.
Yeah. Some people take less than that. Some people take more. There's a whole bunch of factors that play into it.
So for you, like, what would you say your why is for sharing, or doing your podcast, doing the networking, ghostwriting, sort of encompassing all that?
I've learned that each of us, sometimes by the product of our family history, who we're born to, how our personalities are made up, and all that kind of thing, how we're created, I believe, coupled with what we experience growing up and what we gravitate towards and all of that. I believe those are markers, if you will, that tell us things about ourselves. Tell us, not specifically all the time, but many times in an overarching sense, who and what we're made to be, and where we're supposed to go, and how we're supposed to do this, and on and on and on. So you asked me the why for sharing. One of my core deepest values is a profound commitment to truth. And sometimes that means being brutally honest, and other times it just means being open to saying the honest truth is, I don't know. I don't have an answer. And this comes from having overcome an addiction. This comes from having lived multiple lies in my younger years, lived multiple false, not like identity theft type of false identities, but taking on identities that weren't mine, taking on responsibilities and names and ways of thinking about myself that were inauthentic. And so as a result, I'm disinclined to walk around and say the acceptable, the socially acceptable line, right? When people ask questions like, how are you? Most of the time I'm going to tell them I'm excellent. I've never been better. But there are times when I'm going to say, actually, I'm in quite a battle right now. And if you want to know why, I'll tell you, but obviously I don't want to burden you. But I think, Jeremy, I think honestly that most people don't want to go to that level of honesty. Not because they're, malicious liars or anything, but just because it's uncomfortable and it involves taking a risk that people will judge you. And in my case, I'm just so eager to get away from the way that I used to pretend and pose and carry on like everything was fine. That if it means I've got to be brutally honest and tell some truths that make some people think, wow, what an idiot, and walk away, so be it. I really don't care. I've got past that point of where I've got to make everybody happy. I'm not going to do it anymore.
So for you, it's really around being the most authentic, truest self, and being true to both yourself and to others. And is it also to help others? I mean, with the ghostwriting, I would think that maybe that is helping people like Aaron Walker with getting their truths out there. Is that so that all that's aligned around that authentic truth that you're talking about?
Absolutely. And for me, recently I've been doing some work with Dr. Andy Garrett, who's a client of mine. He's a psychologist, and he has his course is called Your Authentic Growth Blueprint. I'm collaborating with him on writing that. And this is I've just got such a rich background to help, facilitate this for him. And we've agreed that authenticity is not, there's no place for selfishness or being rude and obnoxious in authenticity, right? So when I say I'm not afraid to tell uncomfortable truths, I mean I'm not afraid to tell uncomfortable truths about myself as a means of allowing other people to open up about their uncomfortable truths. I'm not going to come and wag my finger in your face and say, look at what you did and look how terrible you are. I would, because that's no help to anybody.
You're leading example, essentially.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So for you, like, why is it so important for you to, spread this message of being authentically true to yourself? Whether it's through doing it yourself and inspiring others, or to enabling others with showing this authentic truth. Like, why is that so important to you?
Here, let me answer it this way. When I was recently, I mentor several younger men through the church that I go to, and one of them asked me, where are you going with all this? Coming out here and being involved with us. There's no money in it for you or anything like that, but what's your vision? I mean, do you have somewhere that you want to go, and invite young men to go on a journey with you? And I said, the only way I could answer that is by saying, whatever that looks like, the way to get there is building relationships, right? So there may indeed be a vision for me for doing that, but I don't know what it is yet. But if I'm going to find it, I've got to keep building relationships and keep showing up and keep meeting with people. So I'm using that as an example here to say to your question, why is it important for me to to do this with others in the process. It's the same general principle. If I want to succeed in business, if I want to become influential, if I want to continue to build on what I've already got, the only way forward is for me to build relationships. And really, if you ask me, that's at our core, that's why we're designed the way we are. That's why life doesn't work in isolation, and we can't all be subsistence farmers living out as hermits in the desert kind of thing.
Yeah. And actually, that's very aligned with your brand as well, as the building relationships, of course. I mean, that's the premise of the podcast and the book.
Mm-hmm.
So you were sort of taking those are sort of two separate things that are, together, as what you're doing is you bring this authentic truth, and you're building relationships, either enabling others or doing it yourself, and then just like letting that take you where you need to go. I think that's awesome.
That's what it's all about for me. Whatever success that I can look forward to, I know I'm going to get it because of the people I surround myself with. Yes, I have a talent with words. Yes, I can write. Yes, I can churn out content. If you physically cannot get to writing your own blogs and Alexa briefs and snippets and sales letters and all that kind of stuff, I can do that for you. But why should you trust me if you don't know who I am? Well, one reason is, the person recommending me to you, and they wouldn't steer you wrong, right? That's what I mean. Because otherwise, yeah, I would agree. You don't know me from Adam. Why should you trust me?
Yeah. All right. So let's backtrack a little bit, because earlier in the conversation you said something I wanted to revisit, which is you had to keep moving forward so that you could let your old self die off, essentially. And to me, it sounds like there could have been some barriers that you had to overcome to become the new you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind sharing some of those barriers that you've had to overcome during this journey?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because the big one was pride. And when people think pride, they think of like a big braggart, some guy out there walking around with his chest out saying, look how great of a guy I am. And that's not what it was, right? In fact, I would describe this as pretty much that deep-seated determination we all have to just go our own way, right? Now, I say this from a biblical context. So there may be people listening who are like, well, I don't know of a higher authority in my life than myself. In my case, I do. And I had the choice to listen to him or not, right? Mm-hmm. But you asked the question, that's the truth. I can't make up one that I didn't overcome. The big one was pride. It was just being fiercely, doggedly determined to do things my own way. And I knew the answers, or I could figure them out, or I could go and research them and I could find them. And actually, no, that wasn't the case at all. What I really needed to do was to learn to sit back and allow for good things to come into my life from an external source that I couldn't really control the timing, and I couldn't control the details and the outcome.
All right. So do you mind diving a little bit more into like the steps that you had to take to overcome the pride that you had? So you had to sit back, you had to let things come, but did you involve others to help you? What did that look like? What kind of steps did you take to overcome the pride, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, pride is such a blinder that you don't see it. So I wasn't looking to undo pride because I didn't think I had an issue with it. Right. That's the cruel trick that it plays on us, is that we don't think we have it. I was just trying to figure out, okay, I had read for years and years in the traditional spiritual disciplines of the Christian faith about fasting, but I'd never tried it. I didn't know what I was really supposed to do with it. I never felt any sort of urge to do it or anything like that. But I was reading this book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster, and it's all about these several different spiritual disciplines, and one of them was fasting. And I was, and I'm probably at this time, probably, I don't know, 10 months to a year into this journey, right? Not making any money, no answers why. Everything I read in scripture says I should be making money, right? Everything that I'm doing, being generous and all that, indicates that a generous man will himself be blessed, and so forth, as the Proverbs say. And so I'm sitting here saying, okay, well, I look around and I know other people who are generous and they are earning a living, but I'm not. What's the problem? Well, I was able to cobble together enough of a devotional life that I got the impression, why don't you go on a fast? So I did. And one of the things that fasting does is, one of the things that I fasted from, I should say, was social media. And then I also did some meal fasting as well. And what that does is it opens up all kinds of time in your life, right? That previously you had dedicated to scrolling and swiping on your phone or stuffing your face with food. Well, with more time like that, you can either just sit there and let it pass, which nobody's capable of doing, or you can read more, pray more, journal more, write more, and get it, get more out of your system. And that's what I did. And through the scriptures that I happened to be reading at that time, the books of the Bible that I was reading and the devotional accompanying books that I was reading and all that, I suddenly realized that, oh my gosh, this is going back 20 years now. 20 years of a dissatisfying professional life. And I could even trace it back to a decision I made when I was a young man that had been a prideful decision that I shouldn't have made.
And how long was this fast or this process?
Oh, it was no more than a week. A week of no social media and 2 or 3 days that were like, I don't think I did water only, but I think I did water and supplements and maybe like a small thing after dark. But I really, that was only about 2 or 3 days. It was like a 36-hour type of thing. Sorry, 36 hours. Yeah, that's not even 2 days, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Doing the calculations in my mind now. So yeah, it didn't take more than a week. And that's the irony about this. I think people also hear fasting and they think 40 days and 40 nights because that's how long Jesus fasted. And no, I mean, it doesn't take that long, right? Most of the time. If you'll give just a little bit of the time that you normally devote to consuming the way that you always do, you'll be amazed what you come back with. So yeah, it took me all of a week, but after that, my life was never the same. After that, I got to an even deeper level of truth, which is that my pride had blinded me to so many things. So I found myself having these wonderful, redeeming moments of tearfully owning my behavior to my wife and to my sons. And I was able to walk around and look people dead in the face and call myself things like a recovering egomaniac, And not too many people say that. Not too many people think of themselves as a prideful, arrogant person, or formerly prideful, arrogant person, or somebody still susceptible to it. But I do, and I'm comfortable saying so. And anyway, this is a little bit more than you were asking in that question, but
this is great. So you, like, the way I took it is you found fasting as a potential solution to overcome pride. So you spent this week of intentionally distancing yourself and giving yourself space to have clarity on how you're thinking about it, how you can think about life and reflect on it. And through that, you were able to overcome the pride that was holding you back.
I would say one minor distinction I would make there is I didn't use fasting to overcome pride. I overcame pride because I used fasting.
Okay. I like that.
And the reason is I didn't know I was dealing with pride until I did the fast, right? It came to me as I was in the middle of the fast.
Okay.
I thought that it was some kind of, I don't know, God was like holding out on me or something like that. The truth is I had to, because the thing about pride is, right, you don't just say, oh, I'm proud, right? and therefore I won't be proud anymore. No, you have to go and renounce that and walk out what it looks like to live a life of repentance. So I was like, now I'm finding myself in all sorts of situations where, that what that person said just got my hackles up and I'm ready to retaliate. And I'm like, yeah, no. But now I'm a different man now. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to behave that way anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's a great method. So you've got quite a bit of experience now with networking with influencers, working your way up to growing the caliber of the guests you're getting on your podcast. Do you have any, I guess, of like highly valuable tips or secrets for networking with influencers that you'd be willing to share with us today?
I got 5 of them. I I detail this in one of the chapters of my book. It's called How to Network with Dream Connections. And the I want to start actually with the 5th one, because what I want everybody to hear is you don't have to wait until you're in front of a dream connection to do this. And as a matter of fact, the best way to do this when you finally do get in front of a dream connection is to already have been doing it on so many other average people that you meet in business, that dream connection gets in front of you and you're not stammering like an idiot because you don't know what to say. So I put this at the back of the list, number 5. It's called Focus on the Farm Team, right? And basically what all that means is, as you're using these other strategies that I lay out, use them on people who aren't famous, right? Use them in your local business community gatherings. Use them on people that you just get introduced to. Use them on people who can't possibly pay you back for it. Use them to benefit your family. Use them to benefit your enemies if you can, right? And so that's the foundation, right? If you start doing this right away, I mean, don't even wait. Just start doing it. Use it on the wait staff. Use it on the people at the grocery store. Use it on whoever. And then I'm going to build this case from there. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is be an angler. And so this is a renunciation of going to networking and social occasions and gatherings and all that to make sales, right? This is basically saying, whatever else I'm going there for, I'm not going there to start breaking out the swipe thing and getting paid cash and all that. I'll do that. There's a time and a place for that. I'm going to these kind of things for business reasons, not to transact business. So when you go with that kind of mindset, I'm here for business reasons. I'm here to create opportunities that will lead to sales, but I'm not here to do the selling itself. And that takes the pressure off of making sure that you get somebody to commit to a contract or something like that. And you're just there to socialize, right? You're there to meet people. You're there to be listening and watching for opportunities. So that's the first one. Just be an angler. Be like a fisherman, right? The fishermen, that's why they talk about it at angles. You have to cast the bait at a certain angle in order to get the fish to think that it's actually bait. Otherwise, the fish won't fall for it. Number 2 is keep your ear to the ground. So I call this is kind of like being a scout, right? And when you keep your ear to the ground, you are looking for ordinary, everyday opportunities for other people you meet. To connect them, to get them plugged in, to get them into a room that they otherwise wouldn't get into. And I tell a story about this. I did this for the mayor of Lacey. He wanted to go to this. We have in Olympia here in Washington, we have this indoor gun range. It's set up to be just like a classic old speakeasy from the bygone eras. It's a charming place. It's a man's enclave, right? And and the mayor of Lacey, Andy Ryder is his name. He has a collection of guns. He loves to shoot guns. And he'd said, I've wanted to go to this place, but I hear you got to have a membership and you got to go through all this rigmarole, and I just don't have time for that. Well, I was a member at the time, so I said, well, listen, I got a guest pass. I can get you in. You'll have to do the safety video and all that, but I can get you in. You do the safety video, then we get out on the range, we pop off rounds, and they have a cigar lounge ventilated in the back, and we can go and sit there and smoke cigars and, and chew the fat. So we did, and that's how I ended up getting him as an insurance client at the time. So that's what I mean when I say keep your ear to the ground. Just listen for those opportunities, and then when somebody comes along who expresses an interest to do something like that, but they have a resistance because of their schedule or whatever, you are the grease that gets them in there, so to speak.
That makes sense.
And then there's gosh, I'm forgetting the phrasing here all of a sudden. Pro bono publicity. And this is also in chapter 2 of the book, but here you're using a platform that you have, right? Everybody actually already has a platform. You and I are podcasters, so people who are not podcasters look at us and think that we have a platform and they don't. And the truth is that everybody's got a Facebook page and everybody's got it. Some people have a YouTube channel, some people have an Instagram feed, you got a Snapchat, whatever you got, right?
For sure.
It's an opportunity to promote other people instead of yourself, if you think about it. And I used to do this. When I was in the insurance business, I would go to real estate open houses. Now, unfortunately, at the time, they didn't yet have Facebook Live, and it kind of irks me a little bit that by the time Facebook Live came around, I was no longer doing this. But if you want to make alliances with realtors and you want an excuse to spend time with them, that helps them, that isn't just standing there chewing the fat while they're in an empty open house, then go and do a video tour and ask them to take you on it, right? If they've got the time. Or you can do it yourself. You can walk through the house and do a video tour. So I would go to open houses and do that. And then whenever I would ask the Chamber of Commerce people to tell me when a new business opened up. And I'd go down and I'd do a video about that new business and I'd interview the owners, right? There's a wonderful way to ingratiate yourself and introduce yourself as somebody that they can potentially do business with. Again, you don't do this to get the sale on the spot. You're just doing it. You're just planting a seed, right? You're just saying, here's a possible, in my case, here's a possible insurance resource for you. Don't want anything, but just wanted the opportunity to meet you. So those three are the big ones. There's a fourth one I included, and this is if the other three, if everything else fails, you can always still end up having a face-to-face conversation with somebody where you can ask them 3 questions that most people are not going to ask them. And so the questions are: what's going well for you? What's not going well for you lately? And what are you looking forward to? And you don't necessarily ask all 3 of those. You certainly don't ask all 3 of those at once. Sometimes you don't get to ask even all 3 of them. Sometimes you just get 1 or 2. But the one in the middle, that what's not going so well for you lately, or what's the hardest part of being you right now, those kind of questions. Mm-hmm. Oh man, people will talk for days. And they will tell you all kinds of useful information about themselves. And it's that I'm not exploiting this information or, publicizing it. What I'm doing is I'm checking it against my mental Rolodex and saying, who do I know who can help them with this?
I like
right?
That a lot.
Because as soon as they tell you that and you think, I know somebody who can help with that. Right? If you're like my friend Kevin Thompson, if you're in the strategic connections business, you're seeing dollar signs when that happens, right?
Yeah. And for you, like you're talking to influencers on your podcast, you ask that question, and if their answer is writing a book or writing blogs, that's a wake up call for opportunity, right?
Precisely. Yeah. What's the hardest part of being you? Well, I got this sales letter and I just can't finish it. I can't get it. Oh, I write sales letters. Maybe I can help you. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll probably add that to my repertoire.
Yeah.
Speaking of, what's not going well for you right now?
What's not going well for me? There's not a whole lot. I obviously the anxiety of this coronavirus thing has everybody on edge, but I added a new client yesterday. I think people are evaluating, do I really want to add somebody who's just going to write stuff for me at this time? Am I going to have the same levels of revenue I was enjoying? So there's some of that, but by and large, I think the hardest part of being me right now is professionally is figuring out, okay, solidifying that retainer base of clients that I have, and then moving on to doing more one-time consulting projects that'll sort of build the income from there.
That makes sense. Yeah, get the recurring revenue sort of locked down, and then get some of the bigger projects rolling in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. So we got a lot of listeners here that they're just starting out, or maybe a little bit before just starting out, as far as creating a platform and sharing. What would be some of the biggest pieces of advice that you would give to someone just starting out?
Know your audience was a rule they taught us in communication school. But even before you know your audience, you've got to identify who you want to have in that audience. Because if you go out, if you have for example, you take my offer, right? Content ghostwriting. If my audience was made up primarily of people who don't really need that service because what they do for a living doesn't involve putting content on the internet, then I'm swimming in the wrong pond, right? So it follows a similar principle as networking. Is you want to go, number one, you want to go to a blue ocean where your competitors aren't hunting. But number two, you want to have an audience of people who need what you can offer them, yet are very different from you, right? So for a while, I was thinking of doing a mastermind aimed primarily at people in the tech industry, the software engineers and web developers and that kind of thing, because they tend to be strong on the left brain engineering mechanical side, but their people skills, they want to improve that. They want, especially if they want to go into business and do negotiation where they're not dealing with machines and they're dealing with a much more complicated and complex creature or series of creatures. So you're asking building, that's the thing. You know who you want in your audience, and then know what they want to hear, are two of the biggest things that I can think of.
Yeah. You probably want to identify like a single person, like that could be like the perfect person in that audience.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can just, I've had guests that they had like an early fan that like pushed them when they were ready to stop influencing, and so now they just call that person by name, and like this is the fan that I'm talking to all the time. Like that's who my audience is that person, and it helps really define that down.
Yep.
Awesome. So before I open the floor for you to talk a little more about your stuff, which I'll link everything to you on the show notes of the website. Now, knowing that our listeners are maybe struggle to share or struggle to overcome the barriers, do you have any last words for our listeners here today?
There's always a cost for keeping yourself to yourself, right? I was just rereading. I'm going to be interviewing Bob Berg, who's the author of The Go-Giver, here in a couple days. I was just rereading his book, and he said the law of authenticity is one of his laws there, and he says the best and most valuable thing that you can give the world is yourself. And I think, to be honest with you, Jerem, I one of the things that brought us together, aside from being at Podfest, I think, is the fact that as a more extroverted type of person, I'm very deliberate about trying to put myself in positions where more introverted people can come up and approach me and get to know me, and it's comfortable for them, right? But what I'm getting at here is you're going to have to take the risk at some point of letting the world come up and experience who you are and kick the tires, so to speak. And I have just never had a problem doing that. But I've known an awful lot of people who have. And I think you pass up, I think you always have to ask yourself the question, what opportunities could I potentially pass up if I don't at least make some effort, a little bit more than I have before? And what I teach I like to say that the way I teach it is designed for a more introverted person, because the reality of getting out there and sharing yourself with the world it's not a tell-all, right? You're not opening up, here's my deepest, darkest secrets and all the terrible things I've ever thought or done or said, or, even given short shrift to thinking about doing. No, it's your presence, and it's your ability to relate and your ability to listen, right? And above all, your ability to listen, and which makes it an introvert's paradise, right? So if you're nervous about sharing, yes, there's probably going to come a point where if you don't share about yourself with the people that you meet, then it acts as a sort of withholding from the relationship, which coarsens it and cheapens it, and eventually it'll dissipate. But the start of it is always just coming wide-eyed with curiosity. And you don't have to be very extroverted to do that. You just have to know the right kind of questions, like the ones I shared with you, right? If you know how to ask those questions, you'll get people talking all day, including introverted people. And as long as you're prepared to reciprocate that and give examples that foster that deepening connection with people, you'll find it's the furthest thing from a tell-all type of, here's me, warts and all, expose. That's not what we're talking about here. So I understand people's are a little bit reserved about that, and I don't blame them, but but that's not what I do. And it's not painful at all.
Yeah, I mean, Paul does tons of advice, squished in a short period of time. I really liked that you the statement that you used. There's always a cost of keeping yourself to yourself. That was pretty powerful to me. Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a lot of advice there.
Sure.
So what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you? I'll obviously link everything on the website, but what's the best way to get a hold of you? Where do you want people to head over towards?
Well, for listeners for your show, Jeremy, we've created a special page. So my website is thepaulsedwards.com. So THE Paul S as in Simon Edwards.com. But we have a special page, thepaulsedwards.com/Why Influence Podcast, all one word there. So if you go to that URL, I have a special offer for you. You can get a free copy of Business Beyond Business, plus a spouse assessment, a goals and dreams worksheet, and a personal assessment. These are a couple documents I've created just to help people start thinking about their potential and where they could go, and and also to give them visibility as to what it's like to live with them if they're married. So those are all available for you at that URL. Other than that, I mean, if you don't want to go that route, if you just prefer to, stalk me for a while on social media, you're more than welcome to do that. My handles are all the same. It's at the Paul S. Edwards.
Awesome. Well, I definitely suggest that you go over and get some of that free material from Paul's website. I think there's a lot of valuable content in there for you. And, definitely reach out to Paul to let him know if you enjoyed some of the statements he's shared with us today, or just tell him thanks for sharing. So definitely go give him a follow, or at least shoot him a message. And Paul, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on and share with us today and being vulnerable. We dove pretty deep into your why, and I appreciate you, being patient with me as I did that.
Hey, my pleasure, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.
Awesome. Well, before I let you go, actually, I like to ask for feedback on the podcast or the podcast experience for you. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about your experience, or just some thoughts or advice you have for what I'm doing here?
I think you've got an angle that is very compelling. Because, right, everything that we do, particularly if you're influential, has to originate within us, in the mind and in the heart, so to speak, in the soul, right? That's part of what makes us human and separates us from the animal kingdom, is that spiritual nature that we have. And what's going to begin to create energy for you here is the interaction with other people, right? You could sit there and do this by yourself and just sort of, spew out monologues ad nauseum about it. Or you can have a dynamic conversation where you're going to get responses and information and points of view that you weren't expecting, or that maybe you thought were going to go one way, but they actually ended up going a different way. And that's where all of the magic happens, because when you get two different people interacting with each other, two human beings, right, there's a spiritual connection that's formed there. And out of that can come so many other things. Out of that could come all of the things that we long to bring into the world physically, in the form of success or growth and accomplishment and all that, have to begin in the mind. And so you have to have a why. And for you to take the tack of approaching people who are doing this and saying, why? Tell me why. I want to know. And don't just give me the standard schlock. Let's dig deep on this. I would hesitate to spell out the specifics of what that's going to lead to, but I would be very expectant that it's going to lead somewhere good.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the feedback. That's great. Well,
My pleasure.
Thanks again, Paul, for coming on here, sharing with us today. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there you could listen to, and just appreciate you taking the time to listen in today. And go hit Paul up and let him know that you enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Jeremy.